Hello everybody and welcome to another FTMA Australia webinar on tips to secure funding. Our webinars of course are held every week, and so far we've had some great events for our members. I'd like to start by, if I can get my Nikita, my PowerPoint won't work. So I was going to start by saying I'd like to thank our sponsors. There we go, it does work. It's amazing what an assistant can do. So we've got our sponsors, and the beauty for FTMA Australia is in COVID, not only have we held on to all of our sponsors, but we do have a new one with Program Timber Supplies, and it's fantastic to see all these companies really helping us help you, and I think that's a really important part, that we all stick together through this. So it's fantastic, and we thank our sponsors greatly. So our upcoming webinars, next week we have the top 100 builders, and I have to say Alistair Woodard gave a presentation to our board last week and it was absolutely brilliant. I really encourage everyone to log into next week's webinar, where Alistair will go through the feedback from the top 100 builders, which is part of an FWPA program. And the beauty is we've looked at the builders who no longer, carry tool belts but carry briefcases, and where they fit and what they look upon to our industry. So we've got that. The How to Take a Stand Against Domestic Violence is another one that we're doing in conjunction with Forestworks and all industry associations and unions. We then have timber treatment compliance by the personality overloaded Jack Norton from TPAA. So we're looking forward to Jack's presentation. We've got a chain of custody program for fabricators, which will really help fabricators working on corporate and government jobs. We've got Understanding the Sawn Timber Market from Tim Woods, and FTMA will be doing a survey to all fabricators in Australia, and some of the information from that survey Tim will use to show in aggregated data to show you how we can project our future and how I suppose helpful these programs will become for fabricators planning. And then we've got the Is Your Timber Fit for Purpose, which we've got Andy McNaught from the Engineered Wood Products. If you've missed any of the webinars, including the mid-rise series, sales and tips, and converting steel to timber, had to think about that one, they can all be accessed via the FTMA website, and we've been putting all our old webinars up on YouTube clips. But for today, I'm really excited about today's webinar. Australia-wide, we don't hear of a lot of fabricators actually accessing funding through the government. There's shitloads of money. Let's not hide the fact that there is a lot of money from government out there for industries, but it's about tapping into it the right way. So I was extremely excited last year to hear from Shalina, and where she had been successful in helping a fabricator access this much needed funding. So with that, I'll stop sharing here and welcome Shalina to everybody. And Shalina, over to you.
Thank you, Kirsten. Okay, I am just going to share my screen. Is that working? Share screen. Okay. All right. Okay, we're good?
Yeah, we're good. We're good, Shalina. Go for it.
Okay. So I just want to actually start by saying on Sunday I had no voice. So apologies if my voice gets a bit croaky during this presentation. Just also, again, a big welcome to the FTMA webinar today, and thank you very much, Kirsten, for putting on the webinars. I think it's a great way for everyone to get together and share some information and just, come together as an industry.
And Shalina, just to let you know, you've got the view up where you can see the next slide.
Oh, okay. How do I change that one?
Don't know. So maybe just go with it, hey?
That one?
No.
No. All right, I will go with that one. Next slide. No. Now it's wrong again. Okay. So yeah, today we're looking at how to secure funding, in other words, grant writing. So on the spiel for the webinar, I highlighted some information about the Manufacturing Modernisation Fund. And there was over 2,500 applicants. Only 200 were successful, so that's basically only 8% of all applications received. The total money allocated, as Kirsten said, shitloads of money, it was actually $50 million. So in some ways with grant writing, it actually might be easier to win the lottery. So grant writing is not for the faint-hearted. It is a real major investment in time. The minimum that most people talk about is about 40 hours of actual writing, reviewing and polishing your work. I just would like to make a disclaimer at this point. So some people are full-time grant writers. I accidentally kind of fell into it and learned that I'm actually quite good at it. So within the 2019 Manufacturing Fund, I was able to secure $685,616. So I'd like to say I have a 100% success rate there. I've also got extensive experience in writing winning applications and entries for various awards and for merit select criteria for a number of different people within a variety of industries. And I think it was this experience bringing it to the manufacturing grant that helped me. Might sound crazy, but I actually enjoy the writing and the challenge of getting others to visualize and see the potential that I can see within a business or a project. So today I'd like to share some of my learnings and tips with you. Just to give fair warning, the whole process may seem overwhelming, but if you go down the path of writing your own application, it's really rewarding. And I'm always here if you need some support or advice. So I think the overview, is that the correct slide we have up, Kirsten?
Yep. If you click the next one.
Okay.
Yep,
cool.
That's on the big screen, yep. All
right, so today I'm going to look at what are the chances, what are funders looking for, project budget and timeline, merit criteria, supporting documents, seminars, information sessions, and the review. So let's get started. The most important question is, what are the chances? Application writing, as I said, it's a lot of work for something if you actually have little chance of being successful. So you need to read, understand, and determine if your project actually aligns perfectly with the merit criteria for the grant. Your project might meet most of the criteria, but consider you're competing against other companies that fit all of the criteria. It's important not to change your company's strategy to fit a grant. If the grant doesn't fit your company, it's just not right for you. For the Manufacturing Modernization Fund, the guidelines clearly stated, we consider your application on its merits based on how well it meets the criteria, how it compares to other applications, and whether it provides value with relevant money. So some tips I can share here would be to look for recipients of previous funding rounds or similar programs and get an understanding of what the government likes to fund, what project did they implement. When funding is announced, there's always lots of news articles and the politicians and companies all brag about it, which is good information to review and to find out what the projects are. Also consider how your project, business or situation is unique and make sure you highlight that in your application. Once you've determined that your project does align with the merit criteria, it's all about getting down to work, and that means the writing. Commonly grants are announced and there's a short window that they're actually open for. So the 2019 Manufacturing Fund was only open for 30 days. And so it's a very short time to complete the writing while also trying to run a business. Just an interesting aside here, actually about 10 minutes ago, I got an email. So there's a Facebook grant, which has just become open and it's only open for 6 days. But there's basically $3 million available. So for each business, they're looking at $4,000 cash and $2,400 in extras. And it's for Sydney and Melbourne businesses specifically. So if you want some more information on that one, you can get in contact. So a common strategy grant writers generally suggest is start the writing process early. Be prepared for announcements and get your key information ready so that when the announcements comes, you are ready to go. Okay, so the main sections in the grant application. So as I mentioned, the merit criteria, this is where the application will be judged on. You've got your project plan, which is the nuts and bolts of the application, timeline, budget, and supporting documentation. For the reader, each section has to correlate and support the other sections. My suggestion is to complete the project plan, budget, and timeline first, and then use this information to guide your answers for the merit criteria. I'd just like to point out here that it's the project that's being assessed, not your business. The credibility and viability of your business is important, but it's the actual project you need to think about. Another point I want to make clear from the start is that funding doesn't cover projects that have already started. So if you're applying for a grant, you've got to make sure you haven't entered into any contracts or signed any paperwork before that grant has been announced. It's only for the costs that incurred during the project period. So my suggestion for completion is to look at your project plan first, then move on to your budget and timeline, and then use that information to guide how you do your merit criteria. So I'm just going to present the information in the same aspect. So what are the funders looking for? The project plan can be thought of as similar to as a business plan, except it is specific to the project and what you want funded. The length of the project plan should be sufficient to the amount of funding you're requesting. So if you're asking for $50,000, your project doesn't need to be as intense and as specific as if you're requesting $500,000. For $500,000 or more, they really want to see some depth. Okay, so the aim and the outcomes. Okay, so the first thing your project has to have is the aim and outcomes. So I said to a colleague, oh, you know, we're talking about the concept of SMART, and she said that, you know, some people actually probably wouldn't know what that is. So your outcomes need to be SMART. So that's specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. If your outcomes aren't in that form, they won't even get looked at. They must also align and address the objectives and outcomes of the grant program. So, for example, one of the main objectives of the Modernization Fund was to support jobs growth and a more highly skilled workforce in the manufacturing sector. One of the main outcomes was to increase job opportunities and upskilling in the manufacturing sector. So very both close in terminology, but the outcomes for the project needed to address both of those. So therefore, a project outcome would be looking at things that relate to both the workforce or employees and the concept of upskilling. It's really important that to get the outcomes for a project right and that you are comfortable with them. Basically, if you're successful, it's these outcomes that you then need to report on and the possibility of being audited on. So if your outcome is to employ 50 extra people and you actually don't think you're ever going to do that, then that can't be an outcome. Again, that comes back down to that outcome being SMART. So in one way, the project outcomes need to be similar to the merit criteria. If your project outcomes don't align with the objectives and the outcomes of the grant program, then there's little chance of securing the funding. Okay. So industry context and business information. So this would be your next section after your aims and your outcomes. This is a section where you can paint your picture and tell your story, all while keeping in mind the reader. A government employee who knows nothing about your industry, nothing about your business, and this is where you need to sell it to them. So why is your industry important? Why is it worth investing in? Why is your business important? And what makes your business stand out? The industry information you include needs to give an overview that's researched and credible, referencing information from a variety of sources and publications regarding things like future trends, political impacts on the industry, social impacts, environmental impacts. All that information is worth considering and including, and it does for the reader paint a bigger picture of the industry and your business. Your business information and context include stories such as your story, how the business started, when you started it, why you started the business. But in all these, remember to focus on your success. So you really want to sell them that successful business. So major milestones, again, successful projects that you've implemented. Buyers are the main players, partners, relationships. What are your business objectives, your strategic goals? I think a SWOT analysis of your business is vital. And then a demonstration of a risk management for your threats. So that you're showing them you understand where the threats are to your business and you know how to manage them. Analysis of your current positioning within the industry. So where you stand in the industry, within your market, where your competitors are, where your current customers are. One way to consider the information you include is, does it build credibility and does it highlight your viability? You want to demonstrate that you know how to run a successful business. Basically, you want to tell them that you're a safe bet, you are low risk. Keep in mind that the government wants to report on successful use of taxpayers' money for their grant programs. So if you're not showing them that credibility and that viability, they're not going to see a project as being successful. Okay, the why. So this is where you get down to the nitty-gritty of your project. So what exactly are you going to do? What are you going to spend that money on? And most importantly, why? It's the why of the project details that it's important to have these relate to the funding body's strategic objectives. So each fund is going to have the main objectives that they want to achieve out of this funding round. Your why needs to meet those objectives. So for the Manufacturing Modernisation Fund, I've got up on the screen there the three main characteristics that they were playing with. So for the MMF, the strategic objectives were linked to a report by the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre. And so this report was called the Sector Competitiveness Plan. It was a 56-page report, but the guidelines for the fund kept referring to this report. So I knew that it was important that this report was read, understood, and then included within the answers for the why. So the main thing I got out of the report was the three main objectives, being advanced knowledge, advanced processes, and advanced businesses. So these three categories we used to explain the why for the 2019 application. By centering the why around the report, I was able to demonstrate that the report was read, it was understood, and the strategic objectives of the report aligned with the strategic objectives of the project, and therefore they aligned with the grant objectives. For any grant, it's important to demonstrate knowledge and application of the current business theories within the industry, otherwise known as best practice. Again, just on Monday, so the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre released more research. This one was called 10 Ways to Succeed in the Australian Manufacturing, and I've actually got the link down there at the bottom of the page. So in preparation for any future grants, I'd probably advise that you actually grab this document. From memory, I had a quick look and I think it's 88 pages long. But I'd advise reading this and considering how parts of it can be applied to your business today. Where can you start moving your business in relation to what this report is saying? Again, it's just demonstrate that knowledge and the research and application. You've done your research, you know how it works, and you're applying it in your business. And that again comes back to building that validity and the credibility of the company, of the business. Okay, so language and the reader. So I'm just going to go through language and format. In any type of formal writing, it's actually the language that you use needs to be very specific. So as previously mentioned, you're using the same vocab as the funder or their advisory group. And it's important that when you use that vocab, you use it in the right context. A few other tips is to avoid cliches, idioms, metaphors, similes. It's not an opportunity to let your inner poet out. Always use the third person for the business. So take it out of the personal. It's not my business. It's not we. It's not us. It's, you know, ABC Trusses, you know, FTMA Australia. It's the company name. So for example, in 2019, ABC Trusses production rate tripled. Keep it factual, take out the personal. If it's possible to cut a word out, do it. So that's relating to keeping it short. Never use a long word when a short one will do it. Organise your project plan with the contents page, headings, subheadings. Use page numbers. Use an annexure for supporting documents. So definitely don't refer to an appendix, make sure it's an annexure. And when possible, use bullet points and make your information concise. Other ideas would be to put some graphs, visual aspects in, photos, images. So always keep in mind your reader. This is really important, especially when writing. You need to consider the reader. So I always like to think of a parent sitting in an office. It's probably 7 o'clock at night. Their spouse is messaging saying, you know, when are you coming home? The kid's going crazy. I need you home right now. And this person has just read through 50 applications and they've got 10 more to go on their desk. They're starving. They're just sick of this. They don't care anymore. And they pick up your application. And, you know, what's going to make them actually read it at 7:30 at night with messages from the spouse going on? You know, what are they going to read? How are you going to keep them interested and focused? If your application doesn't grab their attention, they're not going to read it. And if your application's hard to follow, jumbled, they're going to put it down and just discard it. So you need to make sure it's informative, clear, concise, easy to follow. Basically, you want them at 7:30 at night to pick it up, read it, and then put it in the pile for tomorrow morning. They can reread it, they can focus on it after they've had their first coffee. So it's just always keep your reader in mind. Okay, so project budget and timeline. So this is probably the third and fourth section of the application. The budget and timeline needs to be given careful consideration. So this is something that you're going to have to report against if you're successful. So for both of these aspects. So I'll go through the timeline first. For the timeline, you need to consider the timeline of the grant. So generally big grants like the Manufacturing Modernization had a 2 to 3 year timeline. So when you're putting out your project and your different phases, take the time, implement it properly and demonstrate that you've thought about how the different activities relate to each other, what you're trying to achieve and how those activities connect, and you've fully understood the time. Check with suppliers. So if you're ordering machinery, check with the suppliers. If you're looking, you know, you've got to make it realistic. If it's going to take them 6 months to manufacture a machine, ship it and install it, your project timeline needs to have that into consideration. The training of the machine. So for example, you know, a week of training and then put in your timeline 3 weeks where, you know, the staff are getting used to new machinery, things like that. Consider the order that the machines need to be installed if you're doing it for machinery. It needs to make sense in terms of what you're trying to achieve within your project. If your project involves different elements, say put it into phases and, as I said, spread them out into achievable timeframes. Again, it just really needs to be realistic and funds are given on that timeline. So the reports of acquittal of the funds are expected based on your timeline and your phases. Okay, the budget. So to complete the budget, first of all, definitely make sure you get the quotes from suppliers. You want to have evidence and that you're confident in the numbers that you're actually requesting. Also, it keeps the suppliers, as a supplier company, this is quite interesting to say, but it does keep the suppliers honest in terms of they're not going to think, well, suddenly you've got this funding, they can up their...
It's regarding presentation, apparently the notes are...
Sorry, Shalina, we asked her to come in and help you put it on the big screen for some people
to
see. So sorry.
How do I do that?
Display settings and duplicate.
Is that better?
Yeah. Yay. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, thanks, Dana. Okay, now I've got to think where I was. Okay, yeah, so suppliers, the budget. So it can be quite interesting if you get funding, how suddenly people might add on some extra costs and things like that. So if you've actually got the quotes prior to getting the funding, then you can say, hey, you know, you quoted this much, you know, it can't suddenly jump up now because, you know, I've been funded for this project. So overall the budget, to complete the budget, you need to get the quotes from suppliers. Things that you can put within your budget are installation, labour for training, any factory or fit out changes. You can also include a line item for incidentals and you can put a value against that. That actually doesn't get the funding, however it does show that you've considered all aspects of the project. I don't know how to do this screen change now, that's okay. So I'm just going to highlight once more is to be realistic with the funding and how much you put in the budget. It's not hard for that funding body to call up a supplier to verify that what you've said something's going to cost is actually the real cost. Yeah, so the budget needs to make sense. It's one of those other things. They'll look at it, and if it doesn't make any sense, they'll just chuck the application out straight away. And again, with the budget, it is important to remember that you are reporting against your budget. So the funds are acquitted and you need to demonstrate that your budget matches what you've been given and that you have spent that money on that part of the project. Okay, so once you have completed writing those sections, which is a lot of work, it's important to move on to the merit criteria. And this is where your project is actually scored. I now need to...
Shalene, if you put it down in the bottom corner, left-hand side, you can press the little arrows.
Gotcha.
There you go.
Excellent. Perfect. Okay. So the merit criteria. So this is where the application is actually judged, and each section is given a points value. So as you can hopefully see there properly now, the merit criteria for the Manufacturing Modernisation Fund, the first question was 40 points, second one was another 40, and third one 20 points. So the first one was a business case of the project. Second one looked at the capacity, capability and resources. And the third one was the impact of the funding. So you need to write these last, but you can't leave them to the last minute. So your answers for these need to be informed by your project. So things that you've already presented within the project plan. It might seem like you're repeating yourself, but this merit criteria gives your reader a snap look at the project, and then they can go to the project for the details. I couldn't tell you honestly if the assessors read this section first and then go on to the project plan if the merit criteria warrants it, but I actually think that's a safe assumption to make. So if you don't get this section right, then they're not going to read your project. They're not going to look at your budgets, your timelines. So that 20+ pages of the 40 hours more of writing you've done will be worth nothing if you don't get this section correct. So main things here is draft, 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 edit, edit, edit. Generally they have a word limit. It's done on through a portal, and that portal cuts you off if you go over the word limit. So you need to make sure every single word you write in there counts, and each sentence. Make sure you address the criteria, and each point needs to be reflected in your answer. Important thing here is not to ramble, and don't bring up any new point that isn't in your project, that isn't covered. So don't suddenly start talking about 50 staff and extra things like that unless that is covered within your project. All right, so supporting documents is also another aspect that needs to be included, and these are normally basically you do them in PDF and then you just upload them through the portal. It's important in this one, the grant normally tells you what needs to be included for supporting documents. So for the Manufacturing Modernisation Fund, it was evidence of support from the board, CEO or equivalent. One thing that's important here is that this letter of support is one place where you could put any extra information that you want the funding body or you want that assessor to consider when they're reading your application. So when I was writing the 2019 one, I was given the advice that if there's things like pre-approval, bank approval, or pre-approved finance, this is the place to put it. This is the one place where you can make it extremely clear that you're asking for this much money and you've already got your share of what you need to contribute. If you're going to do the project with or without funding, the letter's another good place to stress this. So you basically stress that yes, this is our project, and even if you don't fund us, we are still going to do it, and we are still committed to this project and going ahead with it. The only thing you want to point out here is that the funding will help it happen quicker. It will impact the timing of the project, and allow the follow-on effects, so the upskill of the employees, commercialization, the new market entry, things like that, whatever your obviously outcomes for your project are. Okay, I'll just give a warning here if anyone has got to get ready any questions, and I will answer them soon. Okay, so seminars and information sessions. So these are can give you very valuable information. So make sure you're aware of anything that's held for the grant that is of interest to you. The Manufacturing Modernisation Fund had one session in Sydney, and it was pre-COVID, so there was no Zooms, no webinars at that stage, so it was not taped or anything. I was actually lucky enough to have a contact who had a person attend, and they were able to pass their notes on to me, so I was still able to get all the information. But I think now in today's society, I think most things would actually be done on Zoom or a webinar. But yeah, those notes from that person proved very valuable, and it helped me focus my time and my understanding about what the assessors were looking for. And yeah, a lot of that stuff I've shared with you today. So review. Yeah, so I've written there review ×4. So any writer would tell you that when you're writing, you actually become really involved in the process, and it's really hard to step away and to see what you've written from a different point of view and see it in a different light. This is where having access to other people is actually really important. So for the 2019 fund, I actually asked 4 people to review the project plan and the merit criteria. So the project plan for this one was 22 pages long, I believe. And so yeah, I got 4 reviewers, and that might actually seem excessive, but keep in mind the amount of money you're asking for. So to be successful being funded for over $500,000, I thought 4 was actually a minimum number of people that I needed to review those documents. So each person I chose was based on bringing a different perspective and a different skill set to the document. So one reviewer was asked to focus on the language and to pick up on anything that was unclear, gibberish, wasted words, too long, you know, bad grammar, punctuation, all those language aspects. A second person I got was an industry expert, and they were asked to apply their knowledge of the industry and ensure that all the technicalities and things like that that I was presenting was accurate and correct. The third one was a completely independent person. They knew nothing about anything to do with the truss industry or manufacturing, the grants, absolutely nothing. I figured if I could sell them, if I could get them interested and keep them reading 22+ pages, that I was in with a shot. And the fourth one was a government advisor. And this is actually an amazing contact to have. So my advisor was able to bring knowledge and understanding about what exactly the assessors would be looking for and what they'd be focusing on. So his insight was probably the most valuable I got. If you don't have a government contact or industry advisor, probably step 1 today after this would be to get one. I'm sure that Kirsten can help find people through the growth in our business programs that the state and federal governments do offer. And I'm sure she'd be happy for you to get in contact with her about that one. Okay, so you send it out for review. Make sure you give your reviewers adequate time to review what you've written. So I gave my guys a week, so it was a working week, Monday to Friday, and then give yourself time to consider the feedback and then incorporate any necessary edits into the final version. You don't have to take everything they say. You might not agree with it. You might think, no, I think this way I've worded it is better. I'm going to stick to mine. But you still need to take into consideration what they've done. Reviewers are amazing people to have, and those relationships need to be nurtured. So I'll make sure the thank you give is appropriate for the level of involvement requested and needed. Okay, so if you consider overall for the grant, it's open for 30 days. So day 1 to 14, you're looking at writing, drafting and editing. Day 15 to 20, your draft can be under review by those reviewers. Day 20 to 29, you are then re-editing and completing the final version. And day 30 is submission. So I'd just like to repeat that point I made at the start. This is obviously a lot of work and completely strict timelines. Your project must align perfectly with all of the merit criteria. Again, and the outcomes and the objectives need to align. Otherwise, this is all for nothing. Okay, and just to come to the end, the Manufacturing Modernisation Fund, the government hasn't given any indication that another round will be offered. I think prior to COVID, I think they would have had a second round, but I think this has probably impacted on the time and if that happens and when it happens. Many grant websites and grant companies refer to the 2019 round as round one, which does imply to me there will likely be a second round at some stage. You can sign up to Grants Connect, and I've got the web address there for you. This is a great program. It gives out notifications regarding grants and anything that may be in the forecast. So you can put in what states you're interested, what areas, and then in the minute something's either in the forecast or something has been announced, you get an email sent through. So as I said at the start, grant writing isn't easy, and I don't think it should be. It's taxpayers' money, so it's our hard-earned money that the government's investing, and you want to trust that government that they're investing in the right projects and they're spending our money in the right ways. It is a great experience, and you really do get to know a lot more about your business and the possibilities and potential that does exist. So if what you've heard today sounds like a great idea but overwhelming at the same time, something you can consider is professional companies that they specialise in grant writing. I don't know what their cut would be or how their fee structures work, but if you feel you've got a project which is perfect for the grant, merit criteria, outcomes, objectives, they all fit, yet you're running a business, you just don't have that time to write the grant and to make sure you're in with a fair chance, then that would be something to consider, is to outsource it. Yeah, so I think that is it. Just like to thank everyone for their time, and any questions?
Fantastic, Shalina. If you can stop share, that would be great.
Sure.
We did have one question there at the moment saying, how did you find out, about the grants and what grants are available? But you answered that in relation to that grants one that you got.
Can I just add in there, the business advisors and the government advisors are another great source of grant information. So if you, again, nurture those relationships, build up a relationship with the government advisor, they're very quick because they seem to know before any official announcement, and they're very quick to send an email through saying, hey, this grant's coming up, looks like it's going to open this date, start getting ready for it. So.
Yep, and we've got a question here from Jake saying, can we apply for multiple projects within the same company? So as a company, can they apply for a number of grants?
As a company, can they apply for a number of grants? Yes, definitely. Multiple projects within the same company. Yes, you can do multiple projects within the same company. So you put your projects into, I would come up with one project overall and then phase it. So you would have different phases. So, so using my knowledge best, so it would be phase one would be, say, automation of in-feed, automation of cutting processes, automation of an out-feed, automation of manufacturing.
Okay, and we've got one, that's a great answer. And we've got one here, is it worth getting your local member of parliament to support your application?
Good question.
As a lobbyist, former lobbyist, I would say yes. So every business should have a relationship with their state, federal and local government members. Every business, if you have not invited them out to your business, do so. So that way, when you put in an application, they're there to help you. So that's really important, I think.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great person to see if they could review it, whether they have the time. But again, that would depend on your relationship with them. So, if you start building up that relationship, nurturing that relationship with that local member, then it's not going to hurt when you turn around and say, hey, you know what, we've got this, can you please review this document for me, or can you get a staffer to review it and look at it from this perspective? The other thing is important, it's great when you get the grant, but it's how you sell it afterwards too. And that's where your local member of parliament, it's great to get them to come out to celebrate with the company. Yep, you know, we've been awarded over $500,000 for our project. This is where we're going. And for you, that's, you know, that's marketing. So you can take that to the builders saying, hey, look where we're going, look what we've been able to do, look at the avenue, and look who we've got now supporting us. And, you know, they're very quick to throw it into their newsletters and to put it into the local news publications and things like that too.
And I would say in regards to that political one that I mentioned before, it's also important. So if it's a current Labor government and your local members are Liberal, then look for another person to support it. So it doesn't necessarily help if you've got the opposition supporting you, whereas it doesn't mean that they can't, but I do think that considering you've got normally upper house members, so every one of us is normally represented by somebody from every party with the upper house, to try and find the right politician that links up with the government of the day who will be making the decision.
Yeah.
We've got another question here, Shalina, saying, awesome tips, thank you. Can we get a copy of the presentation that you've provided?
Yes, I will forward that to Kirsten, and I'm sure she can disperse that one.
No worries. And do we have any more questions from anybody on here at the moment? So from a fabrications point of view, we had a fabricator up in Queensland apply for funding, and they got some great funding through the federal government to put in a frame line at one stage. We've obviously had Peter Ward of Drew and West. He got some fantastic government funding under the Advanced Manufacturing Grant. And the company you've helped at the moment was Dakin?
Correct, yeah.
Yes, so Dakin are building a new trust plant out at Derrimut. So there are, as I said, there are a number of fabricators out there that have accessed funds in the past. And I know that there are plenty too that have tried and unfortunately not succeeded, and they've used professional people. But I think what Shalina has highlighted today is the importance of that language, and to be a matter of fact with the submission, rather than, I loved your part about now's not time for poetry.
Yeah. I'm a natural poet, so I find that very hard. No, I'm kidding. There's one more question there, Kirsten.
Yep. Could you apply with a project to start a new factory, or is it only for efficiency upgrades?
Yeah, so it can be for the new factory. So not the building itself. So on the Manufacturing Modernisation Fund, you can apply for the building, but for the fit out of the building. So putting in the machinery and all that was part of it. So again, that comes down to being able to look at your outcomes, what part of your project can you do, and what part of the project aligns with the funding outcomes and objectives.
Yeah, fantastic. And there are grants. I mean, it's not just always, if I know fabricators who applied in regards to money to help in regards to power upgrades, for example.
Yep.
Things like that. So it is also important for every fabricator, and I've belted on about the Advanced Oz Industry Program for quite a number of years. Many fabricators have participated. The Oz Industry Program gives you those links that Shalina talked about. It puts you in contact with the experts in these areas. So for the Oz Industry Program is 100% free, and they will come into your plant and do a complete business case study on your plant. So they do that, they give it to you. Some fabricators have put it on the shelf, and in 5 years later, they've gone back and done it again to benchmark themselves from these experts, whereas others then apply for funding, and you automatically get dollar for dollar, 20,000 from you, 20,000 from the government, and this project to put towards something in the business plan. But then they've got the experts who will help you actually reach further grants. So if you haven't participated in the Oz Industry Program or the Entrepreneurs Program, it was called, let me know. During COVID, I think I've put about maybe 12 plants throughout the country in touch with their right people, and the Oz Industry Program has changed where they've got different providers in different states now. So if you haven't done this, I truly encourage you to let us know so we can put you in touch with the right people.
Yeah. And sorry, Kirsten, just as I mentioned, that Facebook one I thought was quite interesting. So, that's $4,000 cash. Haven't looked into it enough to see if there's things you have to spend it on, but everyone would like 4,000 cash thrown into the cash flow, but what I could actually assume would be quite an easy application would be my assumption too. And it did make a note that you didn't even have to have a Facebook account for your business. So, yeah, so I'll pass it on to you, Kirsten, and you can, if anyone wants more information.
I will send it around with Shalina's presentation and also a copy to the webinar, so that way other people in your business can look at it, because I think Shalina's put forward some really good points today. And I think the notes, and I'm not quite sure, Shalina, whether you'd be prepared to share your notes as well, because reading through those, the points were fantastic in regards to what people should consider in each section.
Yeah, sure.
No worries. So have we got any other questions? No? Well, as I said, next week we have Alistair Woodard from FWPA talking about the top 100 builders. So it's the HIA's top 100 builders. And it was really quite a great presentation that he gave to the board. And it's quite interesting because, as I said, there's builders at the moment that want to give the risk away, and they're the ones that want that supply and install. And then there's others that are the traditional builders, and they like the relationships and take the risk themselves. So they've done a lot of work, talked to a lot of builders, and I think that it's definitely worth tuning into next week, so you know what the builders think about our sector and timber. So thank you very much, Shalina. I truly appreciate it. Thanks again to our amazing sponsors for sticking by FTMA and sticking by our sector during COVID. We're really working hard to try and make sure that everyone comes out the other end of COVID. And that's the #1 goal for us. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy your Wednesday, and we'll see you all next week. Thank you.
Thank you.